Are you an English monarch obsessed with maintaining a favorable trade balance? Are you a governor who wants to take valuable Native American land? Can I interest you in a French and Indian war? Well, my name is Raspberry Tea. Let's go on an adventure. Intro! I think that is probably revenge by some dead spirit. Because come on, dude. Somewhere between 20 and 40 billion dollars in today's money. That's how much Britain spent trying to preserve their colonies in North America. Today we're gonna see how a little bit of that money was spent trying to defend the vital waterways of Maine. So this is a sandbar on the Cape that's called Cape Jellison. And I just realized that makes me think of Detective Pikachu.
Well, that, I can feel that in my jellies. It's the jellies, it's that thing.
This looks out onto the Penobscot River. And in fact, if you look over there, you can see the Penobscot Narrows Bridge. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it's there. It's a lot closer than I thought. That's interesting. This is a strategically important point. If you are trying to keep Native Americans from coming down the Penobscot River, because white people pretty much held like the coasts, which I'm really close to the coast right now. This is a really important location if you're trying to keep Native Americans inland, which is what they were trying to do. This is terrible. I don't know if you're gonna include this. I might do this again.
There's nothing in my jellies.
A fort on the Penobscot River was first recommended by Governor Shirley in his message to the General Court, April 9th, 1756. The necessity of it is stated by Governor Pownall. As the British Crown has secured and fortified St. John's River, the enemy has now no other outlet to the sea than through the Penobscot River, which is behind me. The door being shut upon them in every other part. These lands ought to be in our possession for as long as an Indian has any claim to them, the French will maintain a title to them. To take possession there will assure the honor of completing His Majesty's dominions on the Atlantic, semicolon. We gotta defend this waterway from Native Americans who want their land back and French who are going to use the fact that Native Americans want their land back to gain military supremacy over their colonies. SAR. What do? We build a fort. In fact, we build 3. And in this video, we are going to visit 2 of those forts. And we're gonna start with the one that was built on this Cape, Cape Jellison, which is called Fort Pownall. So let's go. And of his proceedings in establishing possession of His Majesty's rights therein, behalf of said province, May 1759. This sentence is incredibly long. Okay, one breath up. Arrived at Falmouth, the most eastern town, but one in the province where I had directed the materials for building a fort to be collected and the wood part framed ready, and where I had ordered the troops destined for the Penobscot service to rendezvous. Reviewed the carpenter's work, found the lower story of the blockhouse finished. So that's here. He's talking about here. There's no more blockhouse, because like I said, it was later taken down, but you could still see the stone foundations, and that is this very same Penobscot River. It's a little spooky walking around this site, knowing that it's kind of old, but the one thing that makes it considerably less spooky to me is that this fort was never used. Most of this fort got torn down so that it couldn't be used later by, during the Revolutionary War, which is a point that I'm going to return to later on in this video. And what's left is the stone foundations and some of the earthworks. But the cool thing about what's left is that you can still see like the star shape. You see the star shape? It's actually hard to see from where I'm standing, but I think you can see it. They build forts in star shape so that the cannons can shoot crossways. In 1759, Massachusetts Governor Thomas Pownall sought to plug the mouths of Maine's key rivers so as to keep the French and Indians well inland. In January 1758, he wrote to William Pitt, Prime Minister of England, about the disadvantages of this site, then called Aqua Hasidek. A fort at Penobscot River would be of utmost importance, would take possession of the very fine country. It would effectively drive off the remains of the Norridgewock and Penobscot Indians, as it would break up their hunting and fishing. It would take possession of the finest bay in North America for large shipping just at the mouth of the Bay of Fundy, and would be advancing the frontiers of His Majesty's dominions. this place was important to Native Americans because it was a really important hunting and fishing ground. Then it was important to, you know, the colonies because it was militarily important. Then they burned it down because they thought it would be important potentially to the British during the American Revolution. But then after that, it was important because it was a lighthouse. And this is a really important harbor, as that one quote mentioned. So there's a lighthouse here still. And it's also private, like not private property, it's public property, but somebody lives here. It's a private residence. And it kind of scares me because there's somebody there right now. But hey, your house is on a state park. What do you want from me? Anyway, gorgeous, very pretty, for sure. I mentioned there were 3 forts. One of them's here, one of them's in Canada, so I'm not gonna go to that one. And the other one actually has a building left over. Sort of. Let's go see. If you reach this point in the video, like and subscribe. The last time I said that, I was on top of a large boulder in the rain. It's a much nicer day today. Welcome, beautiful people, to Fort Halifax National Historic Site. Here, where the Sebasticook and Kennebec rivers come together, we have another vital spot when it comes to keeping Native Americans and French people, but in this case, Native Americans, inland and keeping them from where the colonists were mostly living, which is up the coast. In order to understand the 7 Years' War, we have to do a little bit of economic history, so strap in. Here, where the 2 rivers meet, I want to talk about one of the most confusing things about the war that these 3 forts were built for, which was the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War. Why, when Great Britain won the war, did they cede away to the Spanish the rights to the lands that were close to China, where you could make a lot of money trading, and to the French, all the sugar colonies in the Caribbean, which could make so much more money than what they got, what the British got, which was in North America? The reason is because they thought that if you've got colonies that are exporting raw materials to you and buying finished goods from you, that it's so good for your economy to have that favorable balance of trade that it's basically worth giving away all of that stuff. And that is a mistake. It's an economic misunderstanding because free trade overall and in the long run is way better for an economy. And if they had understood that, then they might not even have fought the war in the first place, and history would have been much different. But of course they did fight the war, and this is one of the places that they built to do so. So this fort was built in 1754 during the so-called 7 Years' War, which involved not only Great Britain and the colonies, but also Prussia, France, Austria, Spain, Saxony, Sweden, and Russia, and of course, lots of Native American tribes. And that there was no getting any further with our boats, and the enemy, being alarmed, would certainly fly from them, and do as they did 4 years ago at their fort at Tuckanok. Having fought them in the Kennebec River and pursued them about 30 miles to Tuckanok, they then set their fort on fire and ran away by the light of it, ours not being able to come up with them at that place. Frickin', oh my God, it's down my back. Oh no, oh God, oh God, oh that sucked so much. Okay, cool. So that quote is kind of interesting because it talks about a fort called Tacanet, which was the fort that was here, but it wasn't the fort built by the colonists. It was a Native American fort. 4 years before that guy wrote that, he talks about they had chased the Native Americans in boats up that river. They burned their fort ahead of them. They burned down their town so that the white people couldn't use it as a pre-made fort. What does that remind you of? It reminds me of the new Americans in later 1700s doing the same thing to their fort at Fort Pownal so that the British couldn't use it as a ready-made fort. So we have a little bit of history repeating itself. So 600 soldiers is the number that were deployed to that fort, or that's part of it. I'll get to that in a second. The troops, except those retained in the garrisons, were all discharged before October 17th, receiving from the commander-in-chief the moneys VOJ period, the General Court, expressions of a particular approbation. Immediately, the General Court voted £600 to defray the charges of the campaign and £300 to be laid out in presents, which were to be sent to the tribes upon the Kennebec and Penobscot. Also appropriated a sum necessary to procure provisions, shoes or moccasins and other supplies for the garrison at Fort Halifax. That's here. And £470 for building a small fort at the second 10-mile falla in the Androscoggin, or repairing Fort George at Brunswick, and the blockhouses or fortified habitations at Towon. So, okay, £600, £400, £300, £470. What is all that in today's money? It turns out that just not to build this fort, but just to provision it and to pay off some of the locals was $200,000 in today's money. It was ridiculously expensive, and that is how much the British Crown valued their favorable balance of trade with their colonies, that in order to get some of this land, they would spend that much just to feed people during this war. It's crazy to me how expensive this was. So during the American Revolution, actually Benedict Arnold came and stayed at this fort, and I'm pointing to there, but it was neither there nor that in particular, so let me explain. In 1987, there was a freak giant flood that wiped out the last remaining blockhouse, and some of the pieces of this were washed down like 60 plus miles downriver, and it was reconstructed out of mostly original timbers. And so that means that this is not, as it is claimed, actually the oldest blockhouse, the oldest wooden fort in the country. It's actually sort of like a reconstruction of the oldest fort in the country using mostly original materials. And I think that that's kind of a scam, to be honest. But I'm definitely going to title this video "The Oldest Fort in the Country." The oldest wooden fort in the country. So the sands of time and the repetitive warring of human beings, moving in cycles and accomplishing nothing at all, as wars nearly always do, wiped away what had been Fort Halifax and Fort Pownal. And we are left with this, just signs poking up between the weeds. And I think that as the natural world claims that which humans have built, that this is a beautiful thing, as time heals all and the grass grows over the actions of the colonizers. But from what's left at Fort Halifax on the meeting of the Sebasticook and Kennebec rivers, I want to say thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, would you give it a like? Subscribe if you want to see more. Leave a comment on where you'd like me to visit in the next video, and I hope to see you then. Bye, guys. I don't know about you, but I see that kind of thing as a challenge. Just don't do this, okay? If you're watching the video and you see a sign put up by park rangers, just listen to it, okay? But I just have to go out to the point of where the two rivers meet, which is where I am. It's a completionist thing to do, you know? I just have to do it. Okay, so here's the current from the Kennebec River, which is a much larger river here. Here is the Sebasticook River, and this is literally the spot where the two rivers mix. You can see a slight change in sediment color. Clearly two different geological formations. We love to see it. We love to see it. And there's some erosion and there's some subsidence here. You can see a little bit of strata. I'm not sure if this has been built up by humans. It very well could have been, because I can see a definite stratification in the topsoil. This could have been, this is local till, it's local glacial gravel of some description, but I'm not exactly sure from where. I'm supposed to be taking B-roll shots, but I'm getting distracted.